Everyone. Good morning. To folks joining us in West Coast, like in the US, Europe, and other places. And also, good evening to everyone who's joining us in India and other places. Welcome to Bahujan Scholars webinar series. Uh, to begin with, I will first briefly introduce you with what is Bahujan Scholars. So, Bahujan Scholars is a non-profit registered in the United States. It's a network of graduate students, faculty, and professionals outside of India. The network's purpose essentially is to support scholars from Bahujan communities, build networks, provide mentoring in the form of group and personalized mentoring, particularly, and organize online events on academic and professional development topics. So all our webinars basically are posted on the Bahujan Scholars YouTube channel. You can also find more information on the website, which is bahujanscholars.org. I will paste that link also in the chat for you to check it out. I will quickly also introduce myself. So my name is Dr. Sadat Javed. I'm a visiting assistant professor at Bucknell University in Pennsylvania. I am affiliated with two departments here, Department of Geography and Department of Environmental Studies and Science. I recently graduated from Rutgers, New Jersey. I'm a geographer by training, and before starting my graduation in the US, I finished a master's and an MPhil from JNU, New Delhi, and also worked briefly in New Delhi with CPR and ORF. And I'm really happy to be here and happy to be moderating this session today with Dr. K. Kalyani. So just quickly want to share like the workflow of this event today. So we will have a talk with our guest today, Dr. Kalyani. That's going to be around 40 minutes, followed by a quick Q&A. You can write or like type your questions in the chat box, and we can then take questions accordingly. Questions need to be brief and direct. Please refrain yourself in rather writing long comments and stuff like that. And also, we would love to have some kind of feedback from you. So there's a feedback form also that I will paste in the chat box eventually that you can access and give us your feedback. That's really helpful because that kind of helps us improve the way we are organizing everything. So now I will quickly introduce our speaker for today. Dr. K. Kalyani is an assistant professor of social sciences at School of Arts and Sciences, Azim Premji University, Bangalore, India. Trained as a sociologist, her research engages on different dimensions of social inequalities, gender, intersectionality, cultures of caste, music, popular culture, social theory. Her forthcoming book discusses caste, music, and dissent and is published with Cambridge University Press. She's been awarded the Crash Summer Fellowship, which is the Center for Research in Arts, Sciences, and Humanities at the University of Cambridge in 2024. Her work has also appeared in several reputed journals and edited volumes. She's committed to social justice, and she also writes occasionally for media and other public forums. So thank you so much, Kalyani, and welcome to the Bahujan Scholars webinar series. Uh, I think now it's over to you. It's 11:10, and we will probably start the Q&A around, I think, 12 or like 11:50, maybe 11:55. Okay, so over to you, and welcome once again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sadaf, for that warm introduction. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. And thank you, Bharat, for organizing this workshop series and also for inviting me to speak on a very important topic, especially for the early career scholars, which is how to craft the research question. I would like to share my PPT. Bharat, would you like to share the PPT from your end, or shall I? You're muted, Bharat. I can't hear you.
So you can share. So you can manage actually. Go ahead.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Um, do I mean, what do you call show
Let,
slideshow?
let, yeah.
Go bottom. At the bottom, you can see that screen at the bottom.
Just a second.
Slideshow. Yeah. Yeah. Great.
Okay. Okay. So this topic was given to me by Bharat, and I was really intrigued and happy to talk about the idea and the topic of research question, particularly because when we think about the anti-caste discourse in contemporary times, I think much of it has moved either through a certain kind of anthropological gaze, or there has been some very scattered way in which the approach to caste happens. I think in this context, it's very important that when we think of an anti caste discourse, we have to frame a particular research in a direction that addresses the gaps in knowledge that exist towards the anti caste research. So I think in this pretext, the question of formulating the research itself, formulating a good research question becomes important. And as we were interacting with some of the scholars who have joined here, they are very early career scholars, and it will be very important for you to think about your research primarily by thinking about how you're going to formulate the research question. Now, to begin with, let's talk about this idea of why research question matters. Or, when we think about the anti-caste research, what does the research question address to, and in what ways research question can bring new paradigm to the anti-caste thinking? Now, before I discuss in depth about what research question is, it's important to talk about what is a research, and what are the different components of research that one can think about. Now, when we think about any research topic that we are doing for PhD, for writing a book, or for that matter, towards any project, there are several components to it. The very first component of the research is it's very fundamental, which is the research topic. Now, when we think about the research topic, it is broadly an overview of what this research is going to be about. The research topic basically is a broad generalization of what ideas are going to be contained in the literature itself. Now, it is also important to note here that when we think about research question, or when we think about the many facets of research, it is the topic can hint towards it. However, the topic itself doesn't contain everything. Rather, it's a very, one can say, even a very vague generalization. It's a very vague insight into what the research is going to be about. And then from topic, we have to proceed into different components of the research that can inform research better. Now, the second very important component of the research, especially the doctoral research or thesis writing, becomes the idea of literature, the kind of literature through which the research is evolving. Now, how the idea of literature connects to the idea of research question, that I'll discuss in a bit later time. But to begin with, one has to understand that when we talk about the idea of literature review or the literature that informs the research, it is the broad thinking that has gone in the research process itself. Uh, Now, many a times as young researcher, we feel tempted to say that what the research, the kind of research that we are doing is exploratory research, or something which has never been talked about. And many a times it becomes very easy presumption that a literature review might not be significant for the research. However, as we proceed in the research, you will find that literature review becomes important. Even though initially one's intuition towards research will feel like, literature review may not exist. However, once we start to unpack the idea of research, we will or we will come across different set of literature which one should and must incorporate within the research process itself. Now, the other very significant component of research, and I would say a very watershed component in research, is the idea of methodology and methods, especially in the social science oriented research. The idea of methodology basically tells us how to approach the research itself. If you are thinking about a particular topic, for example, if you're interested in feminist studies, how are you going to approach the feminist study? Whether are you going to do an ethnography? Are you going to do content analysis of a certain social fact? Or are you going to look into certain set of data set which is available? So when we think about methodology, it is basically what rationale of the methods you are going to uh, pick for your research. So methodology becomes very important. Method, on the other hand, uh, is the process of conducting research. How do we conduct the research? So broadly, when we think about method, it is like qualitative methods or quantitative methods. When we think about qualitative methods engages with the subject matter. It will talk about, it will include methods like interview, in-depth interview. It will include methods like conversation, observation, etc., etc. Whereas when we do a more quant-oriented research, which is also a very important method to unravel a social fact, we primarily base our research on what number says to us, or in the way in which data is organized, what such kind of systematization of data speaks about. So, in this context, when we think about research in general, topic, literature, method, and methodology are one of the key areas which come up in our research processes. Data collection, on the other hand, when we think about research process, is the consequence of the research itself. In the process of research, we do come across certain facts, certain data set which informs our research. So data collection becomes also important in the research in general. Now, here, many a times, young researchers often miss out on a very crucial aspect of research, and that is, what is a research question? And many a times research question is formulated in a very vague or in a very general manner, as if it is the immediate questions that is coming to our mind. However, research question is much more in depth, and it's much more than those immediate questions. So I think when we think about the research process itself, apart from choosing the right topic, apart from choosing the right literature, methods, methodology, the data we collect, it's also important how do we formulate a research question. Now, in simple words, if we have to understand what research question is, it is basically, when you are doing a research, what do you intend to do with that research? When what do you want to find through that research? But again, how we formulate it, I'll come about it in a bit. Now, the other important thing when one thinks about research question is that the research question is crucial to demarcate your research from the other research. Now, when we think about any research question, a research question has to be unique to the research process. Research question is not just an elaboration of the other kind of research which exists. Rather, it has to have certain kind of uniqueness. It should create a certain possibility of fresh thinking within the research process. And I think within the anti-caste research, it is very significant to think about the research question itself, precisely because many a times, given that anti-caste research is opening up new dimensions, it's opening up new areas, new foundations of research. It's important that through research question, how we are trying to find out something new. Now, that something new is not always coming through a creative imagination, but it comes through something what is called as the gap that exists within the existing literature. So, when you do your literature review, when you read X literature, Y literature, Z literature, each of these separate works brings a certain set of arguments to the research paradigm. When you ask your research question, you are actually looking into how these dots connect, or if they do not connect, what is the gap between those dots? So, the significance of research question is to identify in what new ways, in what newer ways, or in what newer spaces can the research be explored. So the importance, or why research question matters, is fundamentally because it explores the potential of an unknown terrain. It explores what new things can be found out, what things have not been discussed. And when you as researcher are trying to engage with those dimensions, are when you as a researcher are engaging with those unknown terrains, in what ways you are doing so, what are your methods, what are your methods, what is your methodology, how are you framing your research, etc., etc., then falls in. So the very fundamental of research question is to bring out a certain set of new inquiry. And in our in anti-caste studies, or in subaltern literature, if we look into, it has been through the idea of research question that the new potential research has been possible, or new ways of thinking, new epistemological paradigms have been developed because there have been new research questions that have developed. For example, if we think about works of Habermas, Habermas very beautifully in his works on public sphere, in his works on modernity, talks about how the modern world has changed people's life, in what ways modern world organizes itself, right? But it was the research question of a feminist scholar like Nancy Fraser who brings out the critical perspective of, has the question of gender been addressed in the study of Habermas? So you see, when we think about a research question is inherently critical. It inherently comes out of the existing gap that exists within the domain of studies. So when we say why research question matters, it matters because it is through the research question that there is a possibility of new epistemology, or the epistemological it is the possibility for the new epistemology to emerge, and for the new knowledge system to emerge. Now, having said that, why research question matters, and how research question is positioned within the research itself, we have to understand as young scholars, especially, that when we think about research question, what can spark a new research question in you? Many a times, when we read a lot of literature, we feel so convinced with the set of literature that is there. So, for example, if one is reading the works of M.N. Srinivas, or one is reading the works of Andre Bete, they were brilliant anthropologists and sociologists who have given insight into the caste studies. Now, once we have such kind of literature which is available, and who the research which has well established its argument within the domains of academia, uh, we always feel that what new can we add? I think it is in this potential that we can actually find the research question. Now, as I was also already mentioning, that research question essentially comes out of the existing literature gap or the epistemological gap that exists. So, for example, when we think about caste studies, the earliest form of caste studies began with the Indological studies. It began with the writings of J.S. Ghure, where he largely relied on literature, or he largely relied on the text that existed the domain of in the domain of Indian knowledge system, and he tried to understand caste primarily through the Indological perspective. Now, eventually, there we have an anthropological intervention that comes to the study of caste, and we have works like M. N. Srinivas, Andre Bete. We have works like many other works, which then says that reading text itself is not enough, or it's not sufficient to understand to understand what caste is. Instead, one needs to look into the dimension of dynamics of caste. One needs to understand what the field practices of caste are, how within field the dynamics of caste operates, etc., etc. So you see, from an Indological perspective to an anthropological gaze, there is a certain this kind of shift actually happens through a certain set of new research question. The research question that is Indology sufficient to understand the domain of caste? And even now, when towards 1980s, when we have subaltern perspective, it has questioned the perspectives that were taken in 60s and 70s and even early 80s on the studies of caste, and they have asked, how do we think about the questions of identity? How do we think about the questions of Dalit Bahujan subjective selves within the larger domain of caste studies? Now that's a research question. That is a certain new way of thinking. It's an epistemological question, which is talking about the gaps in the previous literature. So, so when we think about what can spark the research question in you, is basically how well do you read the literature itself, or how well do you engage with the existing epistemology, and then through those engagement, how one finds the gaps that exist within the epistemological paradigm. So if the anthropological gaze was more focused to understand the dynamics, was more focused to understand the village aspect, or the the spatial, the or the demographic aspect of caste, through identity politics, there are new ways to explore the study of caste. So and that possibility came only because there was a thinking that, or there was a research question that went into uh, understanding that what is different in what different ways can the research shape itself. So I think a research question is also very important, not only in just identifying the literature gap, but in doing or in doing the or in identifying the literature gap, one is also understanding, or one also understands what is the epistemological absence in the existing literature. Why it has been that within the early subaltern studies towards 1980s, the question of caste comes only as a periphery. But today, when one thinks about subaltern studies, particularly towards 90s and in more contemporary time, one cannot evade the question of caste and understand the idea of subaltern, especially in the context of South Asia, in the context of India. So, and this possibility comes only because one can potentially identify what is the epistemological gap that has been there within the previous studies. So I think research question has a lot of potential. It has the potential to identify the epistemological gap itself. Now, when we think about research question, it's also important to understand that what are the contradictions that has been there in the existing set of literature or in the existing discursive knowledge itself. By contradictions, I mean, one as a researcher, when you are framing a research question, you have to see that when some research has happened, or when some literature has been written, some book has been written, is it trying to address everything? Uh, and if not, what are the aspects which it doesn't address to? And does those new aspect become contradictory to the larger understanding of the subject matter itself? Is there something that in that particular book, in the particular literature, or in larger terms in the discourse itself, which is under observed? uh, so a research question, especially in an anti-caste study, will try to look or will try to engage with those set of under-observed uh, areas of research or the contradictions that exist in the existing research. Let me explain this through an example to you. For instance, if one looks into the literature on feminist studies in India, or the feminist movement in India. Largely, when we think about feminist movement in India, it has taken it has been largely inclined towards the socialist feminist side. It has and much of this socialist feminist aspect within feminist research in India is informed through the Western ideas of feminism. Now, as an anti-caste scholar, if I want to study, gender and caste together, my research question should be: how has the question of Dalit women, how has the question of Bahujan women, how has the question of minority women been studied within the feminist discourse itself? Now, when you identify such kinds of gap, when one identifies this gap within the existing feminist study and then proceed on to think about newer domains of research, that can potentially create the that can potentially create a new research question. So basically, when we think about a research question, or in your thesis or in your research ahead, when you think about a research question, you have to lay emphasis on within the existing set of literature, within the existing discursive engagement, what are the areas, what are the domains that have been under observed, and in what potential ways your research can be a linchpin to address new domains or new areas in research. Now, having said this, it is you must be thinking how, as young scholars, or how, as a new researcher, can we think about new research question. It is not possible for everyone to identify a gap. Now, to address this, it is very important that one always thinks about their research in by reading the kind of contemporaneity that is going in that research making. So, if one looks into the contemporary context, if one engages with what are the new debates, what are the fresh debates that is happening in the particular research, in your particular research area, one can get a sense of one can get a better sense of identifying the research gap. Now, it one the other possible way to get that spark of research question in you is by engaging with field at an early stage. This is different from the field work. Now, for example, when I'll give my own example, when I was conducting my PhD research, I did a certain kind before even submitting my proposal, or before even doing my field work or writing my research, uh, I actually went on to field not to collect data or to collect information in a very systematized way, but to get a general sense of how field looks like. What are the contemporary happenings that are happening? What are the contemporary events that are happening? What are the new kinds of debates? What are the fresh perspectives that are getting added to the existing domain of research? So once you actually position your research in a sense of contemporaneity, also to the extent it is possible, you will get a better sense of what can be the potential area of your research question. So I always tell my students to get onto field, to get onto their shoes and get onto field and actually look into these spaces. When I was doing my research, I was initially interested in studying gender violence. But then when I went into field, I felt more than violence, there was resistance to such forms of violence. And this such kind of resistance was specifically coming from the women of the Dalit Bahujan community. And it was from there on that I was able to connect dot and then think about my research question in the direction of resistance and popular culture, etc., etc. So it is very important that as a young researchers, when you're approaching the field, you should keep your eyes and ears open broadly to think about what is the contemporary context, in what new ways is the research shaping up. Now, the other important thing will be how you are observing the sense of contradictions and the new emerging possibilities within the field. Now, let me give you an example to explain this. For instance, when we think about anti-caste studies, one of the domains where I think a lot needs to be done more is within the spaces, within the virtual spaces, within the digital spaces, or even in the newest area of artificial intelligence. So when we think about any research, whether it be anti-caste research or any other research which you are interested in, it is very important that you see what are the new other possible domains that are emerging in the research. What are the new emerging possibilities that are parallelly happening? And is there some way in which those other new emerging possibilities is connecting to your research? So a researcher mind has to be a very active mind. It has to constantly not just very narrowly think about one possibility in, or you very one directional way of thinking about research, but you have to be very open when you're thinking about research, that can I connect maybe X social fact with my own research, Y social fact with my own research. And when I connect, so in what new possibility, in what new way am I able to address the epistemological gap? In what new ways am I able to bring out a new research question? So that is another significant way in which you can spark a new or a fresh research question in your mind. Now, the other point I have mentioned here is the discursive engagement and the politics of knowledge formation. Now, this is again very important for a research question, especially when one thinks about research question that connects to the questions of identity. Now, when we and I say so because when we look into the ways in which identities, or the way in which identities like racial identity or gender identity, caste identity, or other identities have been discussed, sexuality identity, etc., have been discussed, it has a certain linearity to it. And this kind of linearity is often informed by the dominant voices. It is informed by who curates the knowledge, who who thinks about those identities, etc., etc. So there is a certain kind of politics of knowledge formation. Now, when you think about your research question, a critical way to engage is also to critically think about these discursive linear aspects of social reality itself. One can think about why is it that anti-caste study or Dalit studies came so late, or why is it that the question of the or for example the question of caste within anthropology has been understood more from a brahminical perspective. So for example, if we read the writings of Andre Bete, he writes because he is staying in an upper caste agrahara, and from there he is looking onto the worldview of what caste looks like. What if Andre Bete would have stayed in a Dalit basti, or in a low caste or the marginal caste community? Maybe the perspective could have been different. So when we think about a research question, the research question should also involve a certain kind of critical discursive engagement with the existing knowledge processes, the formulation of existing knowledge processes, and in what new ways can we think critically of such existing knowledge process, and that can also spark a new research question in you. Now, having discussed why research question matter to how you can think or what can spark a new research question to you, it becomes important for us, once we have set of ideas with us, how do we develop a roadmap towards research question? Now, to develop a roadmap towards research question, I have broadly thought of a pattern which you can use in your in the development of your research. So, firstly, what you can do is think about a very broad topic that you want to study. Maybe, for example, if you are interested in caste and culture, that can be a very broad topic that you can begin with. Now, once you have a broad topic, you then have to cull it out. You have to cull out what kind of cultural aspect will interest you. What kind of cultural aspect is something that you find is less talked about, or is something which is missing from the sociological or anthropological imagination, something like that. So once you do that, so for example, if the broad topic is caste and culture, and from there you maybe cull out a topic like music, caste and music, that it becomes a very narrow topic for you. Now, what you have to do is you have to engage with kind of literature that has discussed music and identities together. Uh, Within caste studies, there has been less work, but globally, if we think about literature on music of resistance, like rap music or music of resistance from street protest, etc., they have been discussed. So your next step should be to engage with a broad set of literature which exists on the study of music, how the idea of culture, music, and identity have been read together. What are the different ways in which these the trajectory of music within social science itself has evolved? So the next step should be the broad reading, broad gathering, or broad understanding of how the discourse of music and identity and social science have been worked together. Now, once you read or once you engage with or once you have a discursive engagement with such kind of literature, you have to identify what is the missing aspect within broad set of, for example, within broad set of rap music industry. What gaps do you find? What kind of, for example, entrepreneurial investment has been there? What kind of relationship such kind of musical processes had with maybe the other mainstream popular culture, so on and so forth. which can be your imagination and your reading of the literature. So the next step after you narrow down your topic is to identify the problem, the gaps, or and more specifically the epistemological gaps within the research that exist. And from those set of gaps, you can develop then a research question. The question should again be more specific to what has not been addressed, what aspects, if you do a new research, if you add fresh research, in what ways it will add new paradigm to the discursive knowledge of the anti-caste study for that matter. So that should be the broad roadmap from a very broad topic to narrowing down the topic to identifying the research problem, and then through those research problem you develop a research question. The other important thing, or the other important step towards developing the research question is how do we engage with the fundamental questions. So, the five W's, as one says, uh, who is who, for example, if one is doing a research on caste and gender, who is theorizing, what has not been theorized, when and what is the chronology of the feminist research. Why has the question of Dalit women being not addressed within the feminist research itself? If the question of Dalit women is addressed, who is addressing them? How is such questions developing, etc., etc.? So it is through these five W's, which is who, what, when, why, where, how, you can actually think about. You can think more in depth about your research problem, and that can help, or that can give you a certain set of direction towards the research question. Now, when once you develop your research question, it is also important that you identify what are the new ways and methods to explore your research question. So, a research question should not be so ambitious that it cannot be done, or it should not be so broad that one research or your PhD research might not be sufficient time to do that research. So one has to very carefully craft a research question by involving what are the methods through which you will explore your research. It will be because your research question will be fresh, because it will add new dimension. It will be good if you can think about new ways, new methods to explore it. Uh, if not, by new method, I mean one should not always fall into trap of the conventional methods and methodology. For example, if within feminist studies one see majority of the research is ethnographic, which is rightly so, and which has its weightage. But maybe if you are doing some kind of a research which requires data set, which requires more content analysis, you should definitely go with that. So you should not be just bowed down by the kind of existing research which is there, but one should also creatively think about the method and methodology that one can incorporate to to get an answer to their research question. The other very important and significant aspect of the research question is to refine the research question. Many a times when we start thinking about our research question, and when once we have identified the research question, it becomes very broad in its approach. It is very important that you actually, from that broad idea of research, the very messy idea of research question, you bring out some kind of sharpness in your research question. You should bring out a very unique and carefully worded aspect of your research in your research question. It should be your research question should be such that if one reads it, or if one if one reads it, or they can instantly get a sense of what you are going to engage with. So it's in this context, it becomes very important to refine the research question, to make it more crisp, to make it more narrow, to make it more refined. The other very important side of the research question is the pragmatics of the research question. Now, as I already mentioned, many a times we can be very adventurous in thinking about our research. We might think that we can do X, Y, Z, and plus and so many a large number of things in one research question. That should not be the approach to do a good research. Instead, one should always think about the pragmatics of research question. Whatever research question you are developing, do you have reasonable resources to approach that question? Are you in a position to collect data? Is your research manageable? uh, is it addressing to the kind of discursive engagement that has been there? So these are some of the pragmatic questions, some of the practical question one should ask when they are framing the research question. Even if there are temptation to do a lot more, one should avoid thinking too many things when thinking about the research question. It should be more narrow. It should not be too broad. So for example, if you want to do a research on knowing a certain kind of demography of caste, for example. Now, if there is no caste census, or if there is very less data which is state-wise available on caste census, you cannot think about collecting demography all India in your research, because you might not have that kind of resource. Even if you have certain set of resource, that resource might not be sufficient enough to collect such broad kind of demographic information. So one has to think, what I want to say is, one has to think about the pragmatics of research question when they are formulating it. And the most important thing, which should be the roadmap towards your research question, is how your research question will contribute to the knowledge of the research domain. This again connects to what I was also already saying, that in what ways your research question, your research direction can add new knowledge, or it can address the gap within the existing research that has already been there. So, now, after I have discussed about the roadmap, how to develop research question, etc., I'll give my brief experience of my own research, and how did I uh, how did I struggle to find a research question uh, when I was a early career scholar doing my PhD. Now, my PhD topic, as I've written here, was forms and practices of resistance in popular culture, exploring sites of caste-based gender violence in Uttar Pradesh. Now, even when I read today, which is like after 5 years after I've been awarded, I feel my the research of my PhD was still very broad. And today, when I'm writing my book, I have specifically taken only certain aspect of my thesis, and then thought about music and caste, and then I have curated a book, which is again 5 6 chapters. So what I want to say is, even when I began with research, I felt that even though I was trying to narrow down, there were temptations. There were sides which I felt I can cover. So for my PhD, I was covering gender violence, caste-based gender violence. I was talking about practices and forms of resistance in popular culture, which again became very broad. But today, after 5 years of my thesis, when I'm working towards my manuscript, I feel even one part can be, can be sufficient to write a lot. So what I want to say and what my learning has been that there will nothing be like the perfect research at first go. It will always be a gradual process of refining, of of going in depth, of curating it in a manner which which becomes sharp over a period of time. So as young researchers, if you feel you have taken something very broad, maybe 4 years down the line you will feel like I should have done only one part of it. That is fine. I think research comes through serendipity. It comes through learning. It becomes gradually refined. uh, However, in this gradual refinement, what can keep you intact and what has kept me intact was my research question. It was there was a certain kind of inquisitiveness. There was a certain kind of know-how that I wanted towards my research work that was consistent, even if it was caste-based gender violence. I wanted to look into the idea of resistance and popular culture, and how the popular culture and resistance informs the social fact of caste-based gender violence. Even when I'm working on music, caste, and descent, it is this central idea of how popular culture, how music, which is more refined aspect of one aspect of popular culture that I'm now interested in, it informs my research. So so the quick take back can be of and quick learning which I can share from my own experiences, that you have to keep gradually refining your research. There is no perfect research to begin with. It gradually comes. It's never a clean slate. The dirtiest your research begins with, the cleaner it becomes. And it's good to be messy to begin with, but gradually, once you are writing your proposal, once you're framing your research question, you should keep in mind how you, out of that messiness, how you are trying to connect dots, how you are trying to bring one thematic, one set of ideas, one set of inquiry in your research question. That is very important. There is the last thing that I want to discuss again about the research question is what research question should not be. Now, till now I've told you what
Uh,
research questions
Kalyani,
should. Yeah.
Kalyani, please conclude. So we will cover those points in a question answer. So please conclude in a 1 or 2 minute. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, sure. So, I'll be very quick about what one should not cover, or what one should not do in framing the research question. As I already said, that a research question should neither be very narrow. It should not be like you are just closing every other aspect and very narrowly looking into one framework. You should keep your eyes and ears open, but it should not also be that broad that it becomes vague. So it has to be, a research question is a very good balance between a very broad worldview or the broad aspect of the research domain that you're trying to look into, as well as how carefully you're crafting or narrowing down that research. The other thing that one should keep in mind while framing the research question is there is no quick yes or no answer to a research question. So if your research question gets answered as yes, this is right, or no, this is wrong, that is not a research question, because it becomes research questions should have a certain kind of in-depth inquiry. The other thing that you should keep in mind, that a research question should not be the conclusion of your research. Conclusion should not be a research question. Instead, your research question should orient the research in a manner where through the extensive research that you will take up, you can draw on certain set of conclusion. And as I said, a research question should always be very focused, sharp, and it should, in one or two line, it should have that weightage of words. It should be carefully crafted in and should have weightage of words in ways in which it can convey your idea, in what ways you have been able to identify the literature gaps. So I'll stop here, but if there are more questions, I can take it up.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kalyani. This was fantastic. And I think you really kind of summarized a whole course on research methods in this 50 minutes talk. So thank you so much. I think everything was like very helpful. It almost kind of gave us, I think the students here, like a good template to begin with when thinking about their own research. So yeah, I think now we will move on to the Q&A session. So for participants, like students who are here today, and if they have questions, please type it in the chat box so that we can slowly take up those questions. I will read them out to Kalyani and then she can respond to them maybe one by one, or we can take two questions in one go. So that's how we're thinking about it. I think we'll probably take 15-20 minutes for the Q&A session. So yeah, go ahead. Okay, I think maybe before like folks start typing and like sending their questions, I want to like maybe ask you about, thinking about positionality when thinking about doing research, why and how that really becomes very important, especially in terms of qualitative work that or research that we do, and how to kind of, make this fine balance. And yeah, something around that. Yeah.
Thank you, Sadaf, for that question. The question of positionality is important, particularly positionality when we talk in terms of the study of subaltern. Uh, when we think about the emergence of subaltern studies, largely it did talk about identity, but the idea of positionality was missing. So when we have Dalit women writing, for that matter, they bring up their certain kind of positionality. They bring up their own experiences. They bring up their experience of caste, through which the discourse of caste gets informed, through which the discourse of gender gets informed. So I think positionality again is a very useful and it's an important methodological tool to think about to, th- to think about the research itself. So it is important. And I particularly think, given that the anti-caste research or the caste research towards 70s, 80s, early 80s, that was largely missing on this idea of positionality. So if we bring in this question of positionality, it definitely brings new perspective, some a perspective which was largely missing. So it is important.
Mhm. Great. Okay, so we have a question here in the chat box. I'll quickly read it out for everyone. So, this is from Rohini Sarkar. So, with regards to caste studies or queer studies, that what often happens is the researchers collect data from the communities without contributing substantially to the community, basically. So, how does a researcher address this rift? So basically not giving back to the community. You collect data from the community, but it's almost like a one-way channel of data collection. And so how do we address this very fundamental question, I think? Yeah.
Yeah, I think this question also goes back to the ethics of research, where one has to address that in different, not just caste and queer studies, but also in research pertaining to knowledge of any community. if they are collecting information from the community, it has to be circulate, or it has to be through a certain kind of acknowledgement. The acknowledgement is very crucial part of the it's very crucial part of the research ethic. But I think what Rohini is also interested to ask is research or is the research always about paying back? And then one has to there has been both sides of the conversations. Certain research, the research, the research is not activism. I mean, that the research is also slow. Research also talks about history.
Mm.
Research is also critical. So many a times it cannot be always about immediate paying back. So one has to carefully navigate between the research and is it always about paying back? Uh, I think there is no quick answer to this, but I think if the research addresses, or if the research talks about the community, it should take into cognizance what the information it has collected, or what it does to that, what it does to the community, how it affects things
Mm.
like that. But if even if there is no immediate response, or there is an immediate cause and effect kind of a relationship, that doesn't make a research defunct.
Mhm.
That is also that's something one should keep in mind.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely. I think there is like different aspects to like giving back or connecting back with the community. Sometimes, like you said, it's slow and it takes time. It's and sometimes it's like, you want to do some research work, which is also like public facing in the sense that while you're also like, writing articles and like, doing like presentations at conferences, you're also engaging in public facing dissemination of that knowledge, which can eventually maybe be like used for policy making. So that's also like a way of like engaging with the field and with the community. So it again kind of depends on your research topic, the kind of community you are engaging with, your larger goals as a researcher as well, what you want to do, and essentially like, yeah, mix of all those things, I guess. Yeah.
And many a times these research papers are so
Mhm.
close, like,
Yeah.
within journals, that hardly it reaches back to the community, or hardly there is a know-how about such
Yeah.
kind of research. So I think what Sadaf, you're pointing is important, that it is important, as especially if somebody is talking about subaltern
Hmm.
identities, about positionality, such kind of research should have a certain kind of visibility
Hmm.
amongst the masses, or else it becomes or it doesn't serve the purpose which it began with. I won't say that research becomes redundant.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
Uh, Actually, reading literature is the only way to frame a questions, especially in the context of Dalit studies, because my background is economics actually, and I didn't do a PhD, but I worked on the case of Dalit issues. So my question is only reading a lot of literature that you already mentioned, that most of these literatures were produced by Brahminical scholars. So one example I'll cite because it will be too long. For example, the role of Dalit communities in the freedom movements, because a lot of literature available in the context of the tribes, but we don't see a single literature the role of Dalits in the context of the freedom movement. This is one. Second, in the context of the even environmental movement also. Uh, Actually, Dalit plays a lot of role, but recently we see some literature. So my question is it only reading literatures that will give us means idea to frame questions, or is there any other method? Because if you follow the method of Brahmins, So even if we are doing literature study on Dalit issues, our outcome will be, it will be typical Brahminical. The tone will be Brahminical actually. So I have this concern about that.
Shall I answer, Sadaf?
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, Sarbeshwar, for that question. It's an important question. Uh, no, only reading literature doesn't help identify research gap. And I think I was also I don't know if I made this point clear, but literature is one way to understand the existing knowledge process. It's one way to know the know-how. But one has to look into several ways, several discursive ways in which knowledge itself is constituted. For example, let me talk about music. Uh, Seldom has something been written about caste and music. But even in everyday practice, if you look into Bollywood music or classical music or other mainstream popular forms of music, seldom has there been an engagement with the question of caste and music together. So that is the gap. So when we say discursive gap or the epistemological gap, that episteme is not only informed through literature, but it is also informed through how the knowledge itself comes to us. And it comes to us not through just books and readings, but it also comes to us through our everyday listening, through our everyday practices, through the way the socialization happens, the cultural capital happens, everything. So, if one has to identify a research gap, one has to, of course, literature is one of the way to do so, but not the only way to do so. One has to also look into several other potential ways in which knowledge comes to us, and in what way, in what forms, or what types of knowledges are not being discussed.
Mhm.
That can help us identifying the research gap. Uh, if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think that
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of addressed, yeah. I would also like to add something on it. So yes, I totally agree. Like we start with reading literature, but I think if you're doing, especially imagine like if you're doing ethnography, I think that really kind of helps when you actually go out in the field and see things for yourself, because that's actually what happened with me. So while I was writing my proposal, while I was thinking about my research questions, I was in the United States, I was referring to a certain kind of literature. My work is in Uttarakhand, by the way, and it's centers around environment, resources, communities, development practices. But when I actually went to the field, I had a very different experience of the place itself, how communities live, what kind of politics shapes who has access, who doesn't, whose voice is being heard, who's not. And that eventually like kind of reshaped my research questions. And that's one thing that I would really want to like press upon, is that we read literature, definitely that's very important, but like when we actually club it or like put it alongside what's really happening on the ground, we compare it with the everyday realities, that kind of really kind of helps us see those gaps, what's missing in the discourse, what new perspective can we bring. So I think that's another way of thinking about like making a good strong research question for that matter. This is ethnography, but imagine if you're doing archival work. I think that's another way to think about it. Think about like what's evident in those archival records, but also whose voices are missing, and what also like based on your conversations with experts or people from the community, what do you think is not being registered in those narratives? I think so, yeah. So just not relying on completely on the literature, but like supplementing it with other sources kind of really helps us think about research questions. Yeah.
Just to add to that, Sataf, I particularly want to talk about archival researchers.
Hmm.
As Sabeshwar, you were also mentioning that many a times there is an absence of archive, or there is an absence of literature, which so it becomes the obvious question: from where do we start? Is it always exploratory, or from where? What can be the starting point? So I think what Sadaf was also mentioning is even within those archival imagination, one has to look into the ways in which the archival unfolding happens,
Mm.
what gets missed out? I mean, for example, if we think about gender studies, it comes, or the archives around gender studies, it emerges much later.
Mm.
But it was not that there was no knowledge, or there was no knowledge formation that was happening before
Mm.
that. So I think even if one identifies these gaps, that is the potential way to think about the research question.
Okay, great. Okay, we have another question here from Megha. So Megha's question is, my proposal topic is related to caste, love, and marriage in India. I want to do the research using dramaturgy approach of Goffman. How can I undertake my research taking into account real life cases where Dalit people married out of caste and got rejected through casteist killing? How can I do it seeing the sensitivity of the issue? So I think it's more like the practicality of like, pursuing a research project or
Hmm.
a question. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, if your topic is caste, love, and marriage in India, it's a very nuanced and a very broad topic. As I was saying, when you have to frame a research question from that broad topic, you have to really narrow down. Uh, uh, if you are talking about dramaturgy approach, or these are methodological questions that can come in once you have the research question. As of now, when I read your question, uh, there's again the absence of research question, but you can broadly identify what you want to do. So you want to look into the real life cases of Dalit people who are married outside, and so for example, if you're interested in doing this, you can actually read literature around you can read literature on kinship and marriage, and other conventional literature. And many a times, I mean, Patricia O'Broy's work, if you read, I mean, the discussion of the caste and marriage is something which is missing out. So maybe that kind of literature gap you can identify. Again, kind of uh, from the kind of contemporaneity of events, many caste-based many caste-based violence happens when a person does intercaste marriage. So maybe you can have a collection of those case studies. You can have ethnographies, as Sadaf was mentioning, about the lived experiences of people, and then through collection of a certain kind of sense of the field, you can then narrow down into what potentially you want to think about. So the research question will be too banal if you frame it as how caste impacts marriage patterns in India. I mean, you have to really narrow it down where, how, uh, why do you come to this question, how it informs, so on and so forth. So the broadly that nuance of research question will come if you read into the many broad terrains in which the lived reality of caste marriage and things like that will unfold, and then you will narrow it down to a certain specific way in which you want to know about it. Are you interested in doing ethnographic reading of the lived experiences of certain women? That can be a potential research question, or potential way to develop a research question. Or maybe are you interested to think about certain statistics, data, or maybe do a certain kind of case study on the kind of marriage, kinship pattern, etc. And then maybe to from there you can frame your research question. Broadly, what I can say is the research question has to be sharpened down from the broad set of observations that you'll be making.
Yeah, but also like, yeah, I mean, just adding to it, it is definitely a sensitive topic, and you need to like take up some ethical considerations and safeguards in place while you are doing the research, especially when you are doing data collection, or even you are disseminating that knowledge eventually. But then, yeah, that's like, I think that can be another whole lecture or like a discussion. So we will not get into that. We want to quickly wrap up now also. So we will now take two last questions, I think. So we have one from Sanket. Sanket is asking how to minimize own biases when formulating research questions and how can one avoid romanticizing cultural practices and present them without being biased. I think that's a great question. And I think the last question that we want to consider is how can we address the issue of perception difference within Dalit and Bahujan groups? Yeah, so Kalyani, up to you if you want to take them together or you want to just take one. It's totally up to
I
you.
can take them together.
Okay.
To Sanket, your question on how to minimize our own biases in research question, uh, it is by and then you say the second part of the question is more dense, where you are talking about how to avoid romanticizing cultural practices without being biased. Now, to minimize one's own bias, one has to approach field as a researcher, and one of the very pragmatic way to avoid bias is by having a method and methodology. So when you approach the field and you observe a certain sense of reality, and your questions come out of those observation, it comes out of a certain sense of conversation on the basis of a certain sense of interview that you have conducted. That is not biased research, right? That is the research that has been rooted in your method. Similarly, if a biased research, on the other hand, will be if you start from the conclusion itself and frame your research question as a conclusion. For example, if you frame it like uh, for example, if you frame like all Dalit women are participating in cultural practices, for example, just hypothetical, all Dalit women are participating in cultural process. That's a conclusion. And if you make that kind of conclusion, that is bias. But if that conclusion comes out of a research process, of a gradual engagement, of a certain kind of engagement with the methods, a certain kind of analysis of those data set, then that's an unbiased research, right? So that is where the boundary can be drawn. To your second question on how can one avoid romanticizing cultural practice, uh, again, this is also about how you are approaching the cultural process itself. So when one does research, one is not writing an hagiography, one is not writing always the grand narrative, but even if they are talking about the goodness of that research, that goodness has to come from a certain engagement with the research. So for example, if I am working on music, or if I'm working on a song and what that song does to a community, I am I'm referring to that song as a total social text. I'm referring to is it as a hermeneutical category which has to be engaged with, which has to be which has to be researched on, which has to be engaged with methodologically. If you do that and then you present your research conclusions or your research inferences, that is not romanticizing. That will be what how you have read the research. Romanticization, hagiography, or biasness, these terms usually come if you are just creating an opinion, if you are just creating an hagiography. If you are doing a research, broadly it can be minimized through the process of through the idea of using right methods, involving with the field, and also giving substantive time to the research process.
Okay. Yeah, Kalyani, can you take up the last
To-
question, which
yeah,
is how can we address the issue of perception difference within Dalit and Bahujan groups?
I
Um,
don't understand what is perception difference here. Do you mean difference between Dalit and Bahujan group? If who's asking this? Ashish, if you can just clarify.
Jed, 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 Jed. Yes, I am talking about within Dalit and Bahujan groups, the idea and thoughts.
Okay. So yeah, definitely. See, there is firstly, even when we use terms like Dalit, Bahujan, or indigeneity, Adivasi, any of these terms are have its own complexities. I mean, it is not that these terms are given. These terms gets informed through the historical moments. So when we think about the term Dalit, it has gained its propensity in a certain historical moment. Similarly, if we think about the term Bahujan, it again gains propensity towards 1980s with the rise of Bahujan movement, so on and so forth. So each of these terms has its weightage in terms of how it has been used and how it informs the social and the collective memory of the people. So to begin with, each of these terms need to be carefully used. So there is a difference between I mean, many scheduled caste group people will not call themselves Dalit. They will
Mhm.
call themselves Buddhist, or they call themselves to other names. So we have to, as researcher, as we have to be very careful of in what historical moment are we pitching each of these terms. Now, also, when we use this term Dalit Bahujan together, this is nowhere trying to pacify or, it is nowhere trying to suture certain different set of history together. Instead, it has been used differently by different scholars. So, for example, when I use the term Dalit Bahujan, the term Dalit Bahujan is a reckoning, or it's a remembrance to the moments of anti-caste consciousness which has been practiced within the Dalit communities and the Bahujan communities. And when Kancha Ilya uses Dalit Bahujan, he is using Dalit Bahujan to talk about, again, a collective history in a certain way. So again, when you ask this question of the difference of perception between Dalit Bahujan, there are differences. There are differences even within Bahujan groups. There are differences within Dalit groups. But whenever we as a researcher, we are using any of the terms, Adivasi, Dalit, Bahujan, indigeneity, any of these terms, we have to reckon, or we have to remember the historical moments in which it has emerged, and how in our research we are using these terms. They cannot be taken for granted. Maybe different scholars are using it differently. I think if that addresses the question.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thank you so much, Kalyani. I think we pretty much addressed all the questions. And I mean, I know this is such a fantastic topic that we can go on and on, but given the time constraint that we have to probably like call it a day now. But thank you again, Kalyani, and thank you all the speakers and the participants who are here. Thank you for your time. I think
There's
this was
just
a
one
fantastic.
question, Sadaf, in
Sorry.
the
Yeah.
chat box about the reading of Patricia I was referring to. It's called
Yeah.
Family
Yeah.
Marriage Kinship.
Okay.
Yeah.
Family, marriage, and kinship. Maybe I'll put it up in the chat box. But anyway, so yeah, so there's a feedback form that we would like you to fill out. That's really going to be very helpful for us. And also, I think if you want to connect with me, Bharat, or even Kalyani, we would be more than happy to do so. And we hope we continue this conversation in the next meeting or in the next webinar that we have. Bharat, over to you if you have any last like words to add to the conversation. Yeah.
No, nothing. Just thank you so much. Thank you, Sadaf. Thank you, Kalyani. Thank you all the participants. And again, I'm requesting please give your feedback so we can improve our programs and also we can cover many other diverse topics. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.